Well, boys, Nintendo has done it again in a move that should surprise absolutely nobody. The upcoming Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake. Not actually a remake at all. In fact, it is a reimagining a la Final Fantasy VII or the Resident Evil reimaginings we've got as of late, which has me asking the question, do any of us actually want that? Nintendo confirms Zelda Ocarina of Time for Switch 2 isn't a one-to-one remake. The last update for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for the Switch 2 proves this game is not just a simple one-to-one remake, it is something much bigger. The big update fans are talking about right now is a new ad page in a Japanese magazine for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and the ad is the same logo fans have seen since the trailer was initially revealed, but it comes with a new description of just 3 words that actually change everything about the game. Reborn across time. Now, if you're anything like me, these 3 words are going to make you kind of nervous. I actually famously said, I don't own a Switch 2, I don't want a Switch 2, I will not be getting a Switch 2 due to the abhorrent anti-consumer business practices of Nintendo as of late, but there is one thing that would change my mind. A new, good entry into the Legend of Zelda franchise. Usually, preferably mainline, but also with the speculation that there was going to be an Ocarina of Time remake, I said that could do it. An Ocarina of Time remake could be the thing that made me, personally as a consumer, pull the trigger on a Switch 2. But it had to be 100% unaltered, minus changes to the graphics, obviously, maybe some updated sound design, things to that effect. Basically, the entire core of the story and the gameplay need to remain exactly as is. Well, with this new information, that looks like that's what we're getting, so no Switch 2 purchase for your boy based on everything we're seeing so far. The new description, combined with the new logo that shows a very different version of the logo that players got with the Nintendo 64 version, makes it abundantly obvious this game is not just a simple remake. It is a complete reimagining from pretty much all angles. The imagery for the Ocarina of Time revealed so far really does support the idea the game is being reborn much more than simply remade. In fact, this game was never outwardly been called a remake by Nintendo. And to be fair, that is an interesting point. We are the ones that gave it the moniker of a remake based on the fact that it just showed us the title, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Well, we would of course assume that's a remake, but they never called it that. Nintendo has been kind of sly and coy about how they've been positioning this. Now, me, personally, and hopefully all you smart gamers out there as well, think remake means something. It means the game built from the ground up but is still the same as the classic games. The Spyro Reignited trilogy are remakes. The Crash Insane trilogy are remakes. Resident Evil 1 remake is a remake. You know, the classic one we got on the GameCube way back in the day that's been ported into Oblivion. Those are remakes. And what we get lately are reimaginings, reboots. They use the name remake because we live in a remake happy world and there's a lot of nostalgia tied to that, and of course it generates sales. But they're not the same story. Oftentimes, it's not even the story's been changed. The characters are also heavily altered. Events that play out in the story are heavily altered. And it really just wears a skin suit of the name only. So needless to say, yes, this isn't a remake. It's not been advertised as a remake. Nintendo also hasn't really done anything to shut us up about calling it a remake. But we're also talking about Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Again, the most lauded game in the history of gaming, especially when you look at Metacritic. I mean, having a perfect 100% score for all those years is so goddamn impressive. Why would you want to tamper with perfection? What changes, what reimaginings can you do that would improve upon this? I said this about Resident Evil 4 when it was in the process of getting remade. Resident Evil 4, the original, is amongst one of the greatest video games ever made. Ask anybody that was around at the time to today, they'll tell you that. There's a reason it's been ported just as much, if not more, than fucking Skyrim. How do you improve upon perfection? And Capcom comes out with Resident Evil 4 Remake, and they don't. Mine is the visuals. It's actually worse in almost every way. When you analyze the story, when you analyze the combat, when you analyze the mechanics, it actually is a downgrade in every possible way. And I'm not going to get into my diatribe about how much worse Resident Evil 4 is than the original. You can watch my review for that from several years ago. But the fact of the matter is, it maintains the question. If something is already perfect, which minus the dated visuals, you could argue Ocarina of Time absolutely is, why reimagine that? How do you improve upon that? By erasing this description and constantly using the word reborn, it is as though Nintendo is actively trying to avoid the notion of this being a remake at all, which makes a lot of sense when looking at the very little revealed about the game so far. If it were just a straightforward one-to-one remake, Nintendo would be more eager to show off the visuals in this game, because that would be the main selling point. Fans have already seen this happen in the recent Star Fox remake, which was quite literally just a simple remake with a visual overhaul, but that's not the case with this game. Yeah, but here's the deal. That's what I wanted. That's what I liked about the Star Fox announcement. It was just that, a remake. It was a visual overhaul. Now, mind you, I didn't like the way they went with the character designs. I thought they looked, a bit too animal-ish, but whatever. The fact of the matter is, classic Star Fox fans were getting what they wanted. Classic Star Fox with a visual overhaul, and that's all it needed. Obviously, an audio overhaul as well. Brand new additions to the multiplayer. Multiplayer obviously not being canon to the story, so yeah, that's great. That's how remakes should be handled. If you want to give a bunch of bonus content as side content, I think that is excellent. If you want to, again, re-record the music, update the graphics, which is kind of a necessity for doing a remake, but everything beyond that, the core needs to be kept the same. That is why the Spyro Reignited trilogy might be, in my opinion, the gold standard for how remakes should be done. If you're going to give us Star Fox just remade, why would you not do the same thing for your flagship video game? Certainly your most flagship video game outside of, Mario and maybe also Breath of the Wild. It seems that perhaps showing off more than 90-second teaser for this reborn version of Ocarina of Time will unveil significant changes which Nintendo prefers fans to speculate about for now. And even in that Nintendo of America description, the game called it a full remake, it was still made clear the game would feature new designs alongside timeless gameplay of the classic. Importantly, timeless gameplay does not mean everything is staying the same. It does mean that, at the very least, the general dungeon crawling and exploration formula that made the original the highest rated video game of all time will be preserved, but the meta description never said anything about storyline remaining unchanged. And there it is. I mean, I get it, this is speculation, we don't actually have any proof of it, but what remake, minus the few that I've mentioned, that are the outliers, have not done massive alterations to the story? Every single recent Resident Evil remake has done massive alterations to the story. Every single the Final Fantasy VII remakes aren't remakes at all. It is a complete reimagining split into 3 separate games, and there's been others to do it as well. People need to understand the difference between a remake and a remaster, mind you. A remaster is just a port of the game, oftentimes upscaled HD and on newer hardware. Oblivion was not a remake. Oblivion was a remaster. It's not a new game built from the ground up. It uses the original skeleton of the code of the previous game. This is definitionally well, again, I don't want to call it a remake because it isn't, but a reimagining, and that means we're going to lose stuff in the story. Even this article here from Comic Book Resources postulates that we're going to lose stuff from the story. Why? And some of you might be saying, well, Leon, what do they add stuff? Okay, sure, they could be adding things, but why would you do that as well? If you already had the perfect story, no plot holes, no character inconsistencies, why would you add, which of course causes the potentiality for more plot holes, for character inconsistencies, things like that. If you take away, well then you remove a perfect, timeless story, and then if you take away some but add others, that just opens a whole can of worms for, again, running into issues with the overall chronology, especially because Ocarina of Time is the most important game in the Zelda timeline. This is the game where the timeline splits, and you have the young Link future, the adult Link future, and the hero's downfall future, which of course leads into the classic games. Obviously, if you're going to start making changes to that, you're making changes to the most seminal aspects of what made the Zelda timeline what it is. Whether you like the Zelda timeline or not, because I know there's a lot of fans that are very critical of the fact that there's a timeline even at all, it's canon. It is what it is. Now, I'm a bit of a purist. Let's be real, bit of a purist. I don't like my canon being fucked with. This game has been the linchpin of Zelda's chronology since it came out. And mind you, that's without getting into the potentiality for censorship. I mean, we all remember our Nubian Queen Gerudo bitches. I good goddamn guarantee you that they're going to be classified as too sexy or irresponsible for today's gaming market. I mean, we've seen so much censorship from recent Nintendo releases. Why would that be uncensored? Why? There's a myriad of things that are likely going to be censored. So once again, that is cut content, whether you like it or not. And again, I have an audience of smart gamers, so hopefully you guys don't like that, because censorship of gaming and censorship of the past is wrong. We're still running into that being possible. If they are making this a reimagining instead of a one-to-one remake, they are going to take things from you that might not be up to today's modern standards. In the teaser trailer alone, which didn't even show any gameplay, it was made obvious big changes were coming. For starters, the entire trailer was a never-before-seen cutscene that was not in the original Nintendo 64 version of the 3DS remake. And that was my first red flag, to be completely honest. That was absolutely my first red flag, was the fact that we had a new cutscene. However, a lot of times cutscenes that are not in the game are used for marketing. And of course, there's the classic, the iconic opening of Ocarina of Time with Link asleep in the Kokiri Forest before he's awoken by Navi. This could just have been a promotional, hey, you remember the scene, you remember the beginning of the game, here's some promo footage, and not how it actually played out. And even if it was how it actually played out, this was almost rather than identical to the original game. Link's outfit's different, and the Triforce is glowing on his hand, but beyond that, it is absolutely the same enough for me to at least still say, hey, this could be a remake. But it had me questioning. It did, because it was also different enough to have me questioning, is this a reimagining? And the fact that you can't tell from that trailer which we're actually getting, a remake or a reimagining, in and of itself is kind of a problem. The article goes on to say exactly what I just said, basically, which is just the fact that Triforce was shown flashing on Link's hand in the introductory scene of the game proves 100% it is not a simple remake, because that never happened in the original game. Additionally, the trailer subtly confirms that the first dungeon of the game has already been overhauled. The outside design of the Deku Tree, which is the first location of the dungeon in Ocarina of Time, is significantly different from the original, so it's only logical the inside the Deku Tree will be significantly different as well. Well, then what's the fucking point? Let's be real, then what's the point? If you're giving us effectively completely different dungeons, oh, well, it's the same, it's still inside the Deku Tree. No! When I'm playing this game, when I'm playing a Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake, I want to go in the Deku Tree. I want to hear the echoes in the halls. I want to hear that haunting, beautiful, but also morose soundtrack. I want to see the giant spider web at the center that you really don't know what to do when it's your first time playing the game. It's just a giant spider web. And you go to the doors, you climb the halls, you go, and eventually you get to that third floor, and you dive in, and you crash through that spider web, and it takes you to a whole nother section of the dungeon, and you keep exploring, and eventually you get the slingshot, using the shield to block. You get the Deku Scrubs, they give you these passwords. You eventually fight Gamora, the first boss. Simple boss, man. You just gotta use the slingshot and get in the eye, whip out the sword, jump attack it, rinse, repeat 3 times like most Zelda bosses are. Bingo, bango, bongo. First dungeon complete. I've got this dungeon memorized. I've got nearly every dungeon in this game memorized. Why? Because it's one of the greatest games of all time. It leaves an impression on you. I want to recapture that. I think real fans do want to recapture that. We want that exact same thing, just with this new coat of paint, rebuilt from the ground up. Yeah, maybe give us some quality of life adjustments for the controls, but by and large, controls exactly the same, story, dungeon layout, all of that exactly the same. Just quality of life, better music, not even better music, just updated music to fit modern sound systems, and of course, better visuals. Like as an Ocarina of Time fan, why would you even be willing to risk losing all of that? Why would you not want the Deku Tree dungeon to stay as it is? The teaser also confirmed the game will have a new soundtrack and full voice acting. Fuck it! I'm done! Guys, I get it. Full voice acting was super cool in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I honestly found it more or less refreshing, minus Zelda's not great voiceover if you play in English, but I found it more or less refreshing, right? It was a very new, cool thing that the franchise was doing. But this is an Ocarina of Time remake. Reading the text was a big deal. By the way, I know a lot of kids that played this game when it came out. They were, like elementary school age, and it actually helped teach them to read. A lot of Nintendo games were like that. They didn't have voice acting. Mind you, when Ocarina of Time came out, voice acting wasn't a new thing. We had voice acting in games by that point. So when you see the PlayStation, by the way, the PlayStation had plenty of voice acting. Most of it not very good, but had plenty of voice acting. But no, Nintendo had this very family-friendly, kid-friendly idea of how to make games, but also games for all ages. And when you had these young kids playing Ocarina of Time, yeah, it helped a lot of them learn to read. Pokemon did the same thing. There's a lot of text in Pokemon, and you were playing it on a Game Boy. You kind of had to fucking be able to read to play the games. So by removing that and by making everything, people actually have voices being fully voice acted, that's a red flag. Once again, that takes away from the iconography, from what made the original game so charming, and charm that still lasts to this day. And I don't want to hear well, then why don't you just go play the original argument, because that's not the point. First of all, the original isn't super accessible. Yes, it has been ported multiple times, and I guess you can technically play it on a massive paid subscription service that Nintendo has that's effectively glorified emulators. But people shouldn't be forced to play the game that way. What, I have to pay a monthly subscription fee to play a game that came out 30 fucking years ago? Sorry, I ain't about that life, but that's neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is, there shouldn't be voice acting in this game. Why is Link's tunic different? Why is the tunic of the hero, the tunic that everyone knows and loves and associates with Link? Frankly, the fact they got rid of that in Breath of the Wild is one of my biggest gripes in the entirety of those new games. Like, the iconography of the hero is just that. You look at Link, and you know he is the hero based on that clothing. Whether he's the hero of time, whether he is the hero of Twilight, whether he's the hero of the Minish, whether he's the hero of Min. The point is, he is the hero, and the green tunic exemplifies that. Now, to be fair, what we see in that opening trailer is just Link sleeping. That might actually not be the official version of the green tunic. We might get the true blue green hero's tunic. That's what he's in the whole game. I'd be A-okay with that. Maybe this is just something for the trailer because Link's sleeping, like his pajamas or something. But if we're seeing alterations to his costume, like it might sound nitpicky to you, but frankly, I don't fucking care. There's a reason that Link has become etched into the zeitgeist of video game iconography the world over. A lot of it has to do with his design. And it's not just the pointy ears, it's not just the blue eyes, it's not just the earring when he's in his adult form, it's not just the sword on his back and the shield on his front. It is the tunic. It is the tunic of the hero that has been used in every single game from the very first one up through Skyward Sword. Yeah, I guess it's technically in Breath of the Wild as well, but let's be real. How many people actually cleared all 120 shrines or whatever to get that outfit? I did, but I don't know how many others did. And frankly, if you've already done all 120 shrines, odds are you don't have enough left to do in the game anyway, so you're running around in this tunic for shits and giggles, I guess. Even Link's tunic design is unlike any fans have seen in a prior Zelda game. All of this was showcased within a teaser that was under 2 minutes long and showed only moments of in-game footage, none of which was actual gameplay. With Ocarina of Time Reborn instead of Remade, there could very well be major storyline changes ahead to accompany those not-so-subtle changes revealed in the trailer. Ocarina of Time was the actual game that split the Zelda timeline into 3 branches forever, so it wouldn't actually be surprising at all to see this new game make its own new timeline, perhaps tying into the Wild Era games, which infamously remained disconnected from the rest of the timeline. But why would you want that as well? When I'm asking these questions, yeah, I get it, some are rhetorical, but maybe you're a Zelda fan watching this, and for whatever reason, I haven't pissed you off enough to leave yet, or leave a dirty fucking comment. Those are always fun. I actually do love those. Look, engagement's engagement. Anyway, these aren't necessarily all rhetorical questions. When I say who would want this, who's asking for this, I'm actually curious who's asking for this. Did anybody ask for a version of Ocarina of Time disconnected from the other games, just that way it fit in with the Wild Era timeline? I don't see a reason for that to be the case. I don't see why Nintendo would do that. I don't see why fans would ask for that. It just seems like they maybe believe that fans don't want the original game over again. They have to do something new. But even that doesn't make sense, because if that was the case, why would Nintendo give us Star Fox, which is effectively a full-fledged remake from the original? The incongruent thoughts here between Nintendo they're kind of baffling to me, especially when you consider what Miyamoto had to say just recently. Shigeru Miyamoto believes remakes do more than bring back old games. They help introduce them to a new generation of players. In a recent interview with Famitsu, the Nintendo legend explained that many players move on after a few years, while younger gamers often never get the chance to experience games released a decade ago. That's why he believes remaking older titles and making them easier to play on modern hardware is a good way to meet today's demand. I don't even disagree with that inherently. There actually are a lot of games that are locked to old hardware that newer generations don't get to play. But if those are the games you want people to play, when you remake them, they should be the same game, just updated for that hardware. Whether it be an HD remaster ported over or an actual full-on remake, it should still be the same game. Because if you're making these games for newer generations, you're not actually giving them the same game you gave people a decade ago that people fell in love with. Like, when people are playing Final Fantasy VII Remake who never played the original, they are missing out on so much. The story and character alterations, I mean, you can make a 5-hour YouTube video just on the massive implications and changes amongst those games. Now, I could do that with Resident Evil. In fact, I'm considering doing that with Resident Evil, seeing as that's one of my all-time favorite franchises alongside Sonic and Zelda. The point is, these changes, these remakes, these alterations don't service the new, younger players that you're claiming that you're trying to make these for if they're not getting the original experience from that past game. Also, let's be real, you could just port the original game. My friend and I were actually discussing this just earlier, and he called it my nostalgia talking, but that's honestly not the case at all. As much as I love Ocarina of Time, Ocarina of Time isn't even my favorite in the franchise. Twilight Princess is. Hell, I might like Wind Waker more than Ocarina of Time, if I'm being completely honest. Also, it's not just a Zelda thing, because when it comes to Mario, yeah, easily my favorite Mario game is far and away Super Mario World. But I think the best Mario game since then is Super Mario Odyssey. Like, I get it. People love 64, people love Sunshine, and those are great games, but Odyssey is the best Mario game since Mario World all the way back on the SNES. Like, sometimes the new stuff is great, but sometimes the old stuff is also great, if not better. It doesn't matter how much you love the Star Wars prequels, even for the people that loved the prequels when they came out. Almost everybody universally agreed Empire was better. Just because you have a penchant for the old thing, maybe it's because the old thing was good, not because it's nostalgia. I guess none of that's even relevant, so back to the Nintendo problem. Nintendo does this thing where they like to be super happy and go after, emulators and emulation websites and ROM hosting websites for games that they have not touched or re-released in ages, that they have no ability to make money off of. So the idea that this is for some sort of, to keep players engaged with these newer titles is absolute bullshit, because if you actually cared about preserving your classic titles, you wouldn't, basically be a Nintendo about it. But that's an entirely different can of worms. The point is, Shigeru Miyamoto, as much of a legend as he is in the gaming space, is way off base with this one, and they're using The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time basically just as a way to make money. It's a cash grab. That's what it is. Based on everything we've read, how can you come to any other conclusion aside from Ocarina of Time is the most famous game in the franchise, arguably, besides maybe Breath of the Wild? And I would still say that Ocarina of Time is more famous than Breath of the Wild. We want money. We haven't put out a Zelda thing in a while. People aren't buying the Switch 2. Let's remake or reimagine or do Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Reborn. I've noticed I've switched between Ocarina and Ocarina a bunch during this video. I say both. Just depends on my fucking mood. Anyway, the point is, yeah, they're doing this. They're using Ocarina of Time and name only to get you to buy a new Zelda game. And it's probably going to be 60%, 70% the same if I had to wager a guess. But 60% or 70% the same is not good enough when we're talking about one of the greatest, if not the greatest video games of all time.